The grand halls of the Zerethian High Council were silent as thousands of alien eyes watched the scene before them. The chamber, carved from dark crystal and glowing with blue light, had never before hosted a human. Yet today one stood there, tall, calm, and strangely unafraid. His name was Captain Ethan Cross, a decorated officer from Earth's Interstellar Peace Corps. Across from him stood Princess Soraya of Zirath, her violet skin shimmering softly beneath the ceremonial lights. Her large eyes, filled with quiet sadness, met his for only a moment before turning away. This was not a wedding of love. It was a wedding of necessity. For decades, the Zerathian Empire and humanity had been on the brink of war. The Zerathians considered humans to be primitive and reckless, while humans saw the aliens as arrogant conquerors. But when both sides realized that endless battles would only destroy them, they proposed a peace treaty. And at the heart of that treaty was this union, a symbolic marriage between human and Zerathian bloodlines. Princess Soraya had agreed for the sake of her people. Ethan had volunteered not for glory but for hope. The high priest lifted his hands. By the will of the stars and the decree of both worlds, the bond is sealed. The lights dimmed as Soraya and Ethan touched their palms together, her cool, silver-tinted skin against his warm, human flesh. A soft glow surrounded them, signaling the merging of two genetic and political destinies. The crowd erupted in mixed sounds, cheers, whispers, even growls. When the ceremony ended, Soraya turned slightly toward him. "You have achieved peace for your world, Captain. I hope you value it." Ethan smiled softly. "Peace is never achieved by one person, Princess. But I'll do my part." Later inside the royal chambers, Soraya sat by the window overlooking the floating city of Viralom Prime. The night sky shimmered with auroras from the planet's twin moons. Ethan stood a few feet away, admiring the alien beauty of the view. "You're quiet," he said. Soraya's tone was cold, but not cruel. "Humans speak too much." "Silence reveals truth," Ethan chuckled. "Then you'll find me full of truths. I'm usually quiet when I don't understand something." She turned to face him. "And what do you not understand now?" He gestured toward the city. "All of this. You built wonders that float in the sky, but you still fear us. Why?" Soraya's eyes softened for a moment. "Because humans have something we cannot measure. You act without calculation, without logic. That makes you unpredictable." Ethan shrugged. "Maybe. But sometimes unpredictability is what saves us." Their conversation ended in an uneasy silence. Two strangers bound by politics living under the same roof. Days turned into weeks. Soraya watched Ethan adapt to life on Zirath. He learned their language quickly and treated their servants with respect, something few off-worlders ever did. He trained daily in the palace's courtyard, not to impress but to stay sharp. One morning, while she was walking through the gardens, Soraya noticed a group of Zerathian guards laughing and mocking him as he trained. "Does your species swing blades for sport?" One guard sneered. Ethan simply smiled. "Not for sport, for discipline." The guard smirked and swung his own blade. "Perhaps you'd like to test your discipline, human?" Soraya was about to intervene, but Ethan nodded calmly. "If that's what you want." What followed silenced the entire courtyard. The guard lunged fast, his movements enhanced by Zerathian reflex implants. But Ethan moved faster, not because of speed, but because of instinct. He dodged, deflected, and disarmed his opponent in seconds, the tip of his training sword resting against the guard's chest. Gasps echoed through the garden. Soraya's eyes widened slightly. No human should have been able to counter a trained Zerathian warrior. Ethan stepped back, offering the guard his sword. "Respect isn't earned by strength," he said softly. "It's earned by control." That moment spread across the palace like wildfire. Rumors began. Stories of the human prince who fought without augmentation, who defeated warriors trained from birth. Many Zerathians mocked the tale, but others whispered of an old prophecy, of a being whose strength came not from technology, but from spirit. That night, Soraya visited him again. "You humiliated my guard," she said, her voice carrying both irritation and curiosity. Ethan shook his head. "I taught him humility." "There's a difference." "You risked much for pride." He looked at her steadily. "Not pride, respect. I don't need your people to like me, Princess. But if we are to live in peace, they must believe I stand as an equal." Soraya hesitated. No alien she'd ever met spoke to her so boldly, without fear. And yet she didn't feel offended. She felt intrigued. She sat beside him. You are strange, human. You fight when others flee. You speak when others bow. Why? He smiled faintly. Because peace doesn't mean silence. Sometimes peace means standing up, so the next generation doesn't have to fight the same battles. Soraya turned away, hiding the faint warmth rising in her chest. Perhaps there is more to you than I expected. A week later, an urgent message arrived. The Dravic Dominion, a hostile alien faction, had invaded Zyrathian border colonies. They declared that the marriage of peace had made the Zyrathians weak and demanded surrender. The High Council gathered, their voices filled with fear and anger. They will not stop with our colonies, one elder said. They will come for Virellum Prime next. Ethan stood beside Soraya as chaos erupted in the chamber. What will you do? He asked quietly. Soraya's expression hardened. We will fight. But we cannot win without help. And your people will not risk war again. Ethan looked into her eyes. Then maybe we find another way, she frowned. Another way? He nodded. Let me go. Let me lead the defense myself, the council laughed. A human leading Zyrathian troops? Impossible. But Soraya didn't laugh. She looked at Ethan, the man who had faced her guards without fear, who spoke of peace but never of weakness, and something deep within her told her he was different. Let him try, she said. The chamber went silent. Every eye turned toward her. Princess, he is not one of us, an elder protested. She met Ethan's gaze, her voice calm but firm. No, he is not. That is why we need him. As Ethan prepared for the coming battle, the Zyrathians watched him with mixed feelings. Some mocked his efforts. Others followed him quietly, curious about what a human could possibly do against an enemy that had crushed entire fleets. But Ethan didn't rely on advanced tech or genetic power. He relied on human will, the stubborn, unbreakable spark that had carried his species through every impossible trial. Standing before his soldiers, he spoke plainly. I don't care what world you were born on. I don't care what blood runs in your veins. We fight not for race but for life, for our right to stand free. His words struck something ancient within the Zyrathians. For the first time they saw in a human not weakness, but a flame that burned brighter than any weapon. Soraya, watching from the command balcony, felt her heart stir with something she hadn't felt in years: hope. As the war drums of the Dravic echoed across the skies, she whispered to herself, perhaps marrying a human was not for peace, but for destiny. The skies above Virellum Prime burned with streaks of fire as the first enemy ships entered orbit. The Dravic Dominion, a ruthless race of conquerors, had come to destroy the peace the marriage had created. Their fleet was enormous, black spiked vessels that looked like floating beasts. In the royal war hall, chaos filled the air. Commanders shouted orders, screens flickered with red alerts, and the hum of power cores shook the floor. Princess Soraya stood before the tactical display, her violet eyes sharp and cold, but her heart was heavy with worry. And beside her stood Captain Ethan Cross, dressed not in Zyrathian armor but in the old uniform of Earth's Peace Corps. Simple, worn and human. You do not have to do this, Soraya said quietly, turning toward him. This is not your world. Ethan looked at her. It is now. You made me part of it. Soraya hesitated. She saw no fear in his face, only resolve. Humans were strange, fragile bodies but unshakable spirits. He looked back at the display. They'll come for the outer defense rings first. Once those fall, the capital is next, the generals murmured. We've seen their tactics before. They overwhelm by numbers. No force can stop them. Ethan pointed at the display. That's why we won't stop them. We'll redirect them. The room fell silent. He explained his plan with calm precision. Zyrathian fleets fight with formation logic, predictable, calculated. The Dravics know that. But humans, we fight differently. We adapt. We change the pattern. He traced his finger across the holographic map. We draw them toward the moon's shadow where we hide a strike team. When they commit to the attack, we hit their engines from behind. A commander frowned. That's madness. You're suggesting we divide our fleet? Ethan smiled slightly. I'm suggesting we make them think we're weaker than we are. The Dravics expect perfection. Let's give them chaos instead. Soraya looked around the table. The alien shifted uneasily, but none spoke against him. There was something in his voice, like a strange confidence that pulled them in like gravity. Finally, she nodded. So be it. Captain Cross, you will command the outer defense. I will hold the capital shield myself. Ethan bowed. Then we fight for peace, together. The battle began within hours. The outer defense ring glowed bright blue as hundreds of Zyrathian ships formed a wall around the planet. The Dravik fleet appeared from hyperspace like a storm of black steel. Explosions lit the void as the first volleys were exchanged. Inside the command ship, Ethan stood on the bridge, his eyes scanning the screens. Every instinct told him the same thing. The Draviks were faster, stronger, and more advanced. But they were also arrogant. Signal the east flank, he ordered. Fall back 20 clicks. Make it look like we're losing ground. The Zyrathian officers hesitated but obeyed. The retreat created a hole in the defense line, and the Draviks, thinking they had an advantage, rushed forward. Ethan's lips curved into a hard smile. Now, from the moon's dark side, hidden human-designed drones, old relics from the Earth-Zerath War, powered up and launched a surprise barrage. Plasma torpedoes ripped through the Dravik formation, shattering half their front line. Cheers filled the bridge. They're breaking ranks. One officer shouted. Ethan stayed calm. Hold your positions. Don't chase. Let them regroup, then hit the engines. Minutes later, explosions flared across the battlefield. The once perfect enemy formation turned into chaos. Watching from the capital, Soraya could hardly believe it. He's turning the impossible into victory, she whispered. But the Draviks were not defeated yet. Their flagship, the Harrow, was massive, a war titan capable of crushing entire fleets. It descended into the battle, charging its energy cannons. Pull the fleet back, cried a commander. Ethan narrowed his eyes. No, target their core. I'll handle the Harrow. The bridge fell silent. Soraya's voice came over the comm. Ethan, you can't face that ship alone. He replied calmly, I'm not alone. I've got every human who ever believed peace was worth fighting for standing with me. He piloted his ship, the Resolute, directly toward the Harrow. The Zerathian crew looked terrified but trusted him. The enemy flagship fired. A beam of pure energy ripped through space. Ethan's ship shook violently, alarm screaming. Shields down to 40%. An officer yelled. Ethan gritted his teeth. Hold steady. Bring us closer. Closer? That's suicide. He didn't answer. Instead, he activated a manual override, something most Zyrathian pilots had forgotten existed. The Resolute's engines roared as he pushed it beyond safe limits. At 5 kilometers, the Harrow loomed like a mountain of death. Fire all cannons, Ethan shouted. The Resolute unleashed everything. Plasma bolts, railguns, EMP bursts. But the Harrow's shields absorbed most of it. Then Ethan did something no Zyrathian commander would have done. He cut the engines and let the ship drift. Why are we stopping? An officer cried. Ethan stared at the monitor, watching the Harrow's next beam charge. Because sometimes to win, you have to let the enemy think they've already beaten you. The beam fired, a blinding light that struck the Resolute dead center. The crew screamed. Systems failed. Everything went dark. Soraya, watching from the command balcony on Virelon, felt her heart shatter. No, Ethan. But in the silence of space, the drifting ship moved, just enough to slip under the Harrow's belly. The Draviks didn't notice. Ethan, covered in sweat, whispered to his engineer, Now, detach the core. The engineer stared in shock. That'll destroy us. Ethan's voice was steady. Not if we eject in time. He pressed the button. The ship's reactor core detached, glowing brighter and brighter. Ethan and the crew launched the escape pod seconds before the explosion consumed the Harrow in a white-hot blaze. The shockwave spread across the battlefield, shaking every ship in orbit. When the light faded, the Harrow was gone. The Dravik fleet, leaderless, broken, terrified, began to retreat. Hours later, the survivors returned to the capital. The city celebrated, the people cheering for the human who had done what no one else could. Ethan, bruised and exhausted, stood on the landing platform as Soraya ran to meet him. You're alive, she said, her voice trembling. He smiled weakly. Told you I'd handle it. She looked at him, searching his eyes. You destroyed the enemy flagship with a single ship. How? He shrugged. Sometimes strength isn't about weapons. It's about will. Her gaze softened. You risked everything for a world not your own. Why? Ethan looked toward the horizon where the twin moons rose. Because peace is only real when you're willing to fight for someone else's tomorrow. For the first time, Soraya reached for his hand not as a princess or diplomat, but as someone who finally understood what made humans different. But peace would not last long. In the far reaches of space, the Dravic Emperor watched the recordings of the battle, especially the human who destroyed his greatest ship. This human, the Emperor growled. He fights without enhancement. No implants, no power core, and yet he wins. His advisor bowed. It seems their strength lies not in flesh, but in something unseen. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. Then we will test it. Prepare the next wave. I want that human brought before me alive. Back on Virellum Prime, Ethan stood on a balcony with Soraya as fireworks lit the sky. The crowd below chanted his name. Cross. Cross! Cross! Soraya looked at him. They call you a hero, he smiled. Heroes are just survivors with good timing. She shook her head softly. No, you are something else. You are human. And in her voice, for the first time, that word sounded not weak, but sacred. As the stars shone above them, neither of them knew that this victory was only the beginning. The universe had taken notice of humanity, and soon they would learn what human strength truly meant. The war drums of the universe had not ended. Across the black void, the Dravic Emperor plotted vengeance, fueled by the humiliation of his flagship's destruction. Reports reached him constantly. The human, Captain Ethan Cross, had become a symbol not just for the Zerathians, but for other oppressed worlds as well. Send him to me alive, the Emperor commanded, his voice echoing in the war chamber. I want to see if this human is truly dangerous, or just lucky. Meanwhile, on Virellum Prime, life was slowly returning to normal. The citizens celebrated Ethan and Soraya, calling their marriage a symbol of hope. Yet the calm was fragile. Intelligence reports warned that the Dravics were gathering a fleet unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Soraya stood on the balcony of the palace, her violet eyes scanning the horizon. Ethan joined her, carrying a small tray of food, a rare moment of peace amidst looming threats. You seem calm, Soraya said. Ethan shook his head. I've learned that fear doesn't solve problems. Action does, she frowned. But the Dravics, they are not like any enemy you've faced. Ethan's gaze hardened. No one is like us either, and that is why we will win. Days later, a Dravic fleet appeared in orbit, larger than any before. Their ships were black as void, covered in jagged edges, each bristling with weapons capable of annihilating planets. The Emperor's flagship, Oblivion, led them, dwarfing every other vessel in size and firepower. The Zerathian fleet scrambled into position, their weapons fired, lighting up space with flashes of plasma. Yet the Dravics advanced, unstoppable, confident in their numbers. Ethan stepped onto the main bridge of Resolute 2, the newest ship built for him in secret. It was stronger, faster, but still a human vessel, nothing like the Emperor's massive war machines. Captain Cross, a Zerathian admiral, said nervously, "We cannot face them head-on. Our ships will be destroyed in minutes." Ethan smiled faintly. "Then we don't face them head-on. We face them the human way, with courage, strategy, and surprise." The battle began with a deafening roar. The Zerathian fleet engaged, but the Dravics pressed forward relentlessly. Explosions rocked ships, sending debris tumbling into the void. Ethan observed the battle through the view screens, searching for the Emperor's flagship. "There," he said, pointing at the massive shadow looming over the fleet. "Oblivion. That's our target," Soraya's communicator buzzed. "You cannot approach that ship alone," she warned. Ethan nodded. "I won't be alone. I have the humans and Zerathians who trust me." He activated the resonance pulse engines, a prototype human invention designed to allow a single ship to temporarily phase through space barriers. No Zerathian had ever seen such technology, and the Dravics certainly had no idea. The Resolute 2 shot forward like a streak of silver light, slipping past enemy fire, weaving between lasers and plasma bursts. The Emperor's flagship loomed ever larger, its energy cannons charging. Ethan's voice rang over the comms. "Prepare the boarding pods. We go inside." Inside the Dravic flagship Oblivion, the Emperor waited. His tentacles, tipped with sharp golden claws, tapped impatiently against the control deck. "So," he hissed, "the human thinks he can face me?" Ethan stepped onto the deck, flanked by a team of elite Zerathian warriors and human soldiers. His eyes never wavered. The Emperor sneered. You are weak, fragile, and small. You cannot possibly defeat me. Ethan's voice was calm. Strength is not only measured in size or weaponry. Sometimes strength is measured by courage, by will, and by the heart. With a sudden burst, the Emperor struck. His claws lashed at Ethan with the speed of a lightning strike, but Ethan dodged, not with advanced tech, but instinct and training honed through countless battles. Every movement was precise, every reaction deliberate. The Emperor roared, increasing his attacks, sending shockwaves through the deck. Ethan countered each strike, dodging, blocking, and striking when the moment came. The Xyrathian warriors and humans followed his lead, moving with a unity and speed that surprised the Dravic soldiers. The battle raged, echoing through the corridors of the massive ship. Despite their size and enhancements, the Dravic troops began to falter. They had never fought an opponent who fought without fear, who could predict and adapt with unmatched instinct. Ethan led a charge to the Emperor's control room. "We are not here to destroy your people," he said, "but to stop your tyranny." The Emperor laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "You cannot stop me." Ethan took a deep breath, channeling every ounce of human strength. Not muscle, not weaponry, but the determination to protect life itself. He leaped forward, dodging the Emperor's final strike, and delivered a precise blow that disabled the main control interface. Sparks flew, alarms screamed, and the massive ship shuddered violently. For the first time, the Emperor hesitated. No one had ever struck him like that. His pride and arrogance had blinded him to the human factor. Courage beyond reason, will beyond limits. Outside, the Xyrathian fleet followed Ethan's signal. They fired a coordinated strike, targeting the core systems of Oblivion now weakened by the borders. Explosions tore through the ship, and the Dravic fleet, seeing their flagship compromised, began to retreat. Back inside, Ethan stood tall, facing the Emperor. "This is over. Your reign of terror ends today." The Emperor, defeated and humiliated, slumped in rage. "Impossible. A human." Ethan stepped forward. Not just a human who believes that peace is worth fighting for. With one final coordinated effort, the Emperor's ship was disabled. The Dravic fleet scattered into the stars. Their threat diminished for now. The galaxy had witnessed something extraordinary. A human, fragile and small compared to the titans of space, standing victorious against impossible odds. On Virellon Prime, celebrations erupted. Citizens cheered, not just for victory but for the symbol that humanity had become. Captain Ethan Cross, the human who had married for peace, had proven that humans were more than survivalists. They were innovators, leaders, and warriors of the spirit. Soraya stood beside him as the crowd chanted. "You've done more than win a battle," she said softly. "You've given hope to every world that watches us tonight." Ethan looked at her, exhaustion and pride mingling in his smile. "Hope is something worth fighting for, Princess. And sometimes it begins with one small choice, or one human willing to stand." She placed her hand in his, finally seeing the man behind the title. "You are more than I imagined. More than any prophecy," Ethan chuckled faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe humans are just stubborn." Soraya laughed, a soft sound that carried across the balcony. "No, humans are extraordinary." In the days that followed, treaties were signed across the galaxy. Former enemies now sought peace. Inspired by the courage of a human who had stood against the odds, the Xyrathian Empire strengthened not by fear or power but by unity and trust. And Ethan? He continued to stand beside Soraya, not as a ruler, not as a conqueror, but as a human who had changed the course of history simply by being himself. In quiet moments, he would look at the stars, thinking of the worlds that still needed courage, the lives that still needed protection, and the battles that still lay ahead. But he was no longer afraid. Humans had proven something universal, that strength is not just in weapons or numbers, but in spirit, will, and heart. The galaxy had seen the power of humanity, and they would never forget.